Okay, welcome back to another Between the Pages book chat. And today we have fantasy author S.L. Harby with us today. And he's going to be discussing his book, Shadows of a Dream, which is book one in the Well of Shadows series. So I'm going to turn it over to him now. Let him introduce himself. Take it away.
Hey, I'm S.L. Harby. I'm a perpetual Jersey boy. I just finished my debut novel, Shadows of a Dream. It's a what I would term portal fantasy. It's a fantasy novel. It's really mired in reality. I've heard it described as a never-ending story, all grown up, which I definitely like because certainly love never-ending story. Rooted in a lifetime of tabletop gaming, it follows Stephen, a once bright man trapped in the malaise of a loveless marriage and a thankless job. When tragedy strikes, he finds the world he thought was simply a product of his imagination is in actuality a real place that holds the key to making sense of it all. Within the world of Tyr, each person on Earth has a reflection. Stevens is a thief called Hollis the Slender. Within Hollis, Stephen sees everything he always thought he wanted. As the two grow closer and the edges of each of their personalities begin to blur, they must work together to solve the murders of their closest friends in both worlds before joining them in death.
Well, that's that's a teaser. That one, right? The last line.
The synopsis is always the hardest part of the book, in my opinion.
That's a bad synopsis. And you kind of answered the first question, which was give an overview of the book. So obviously one of your inspirations was D&D, as we
Absolutely.
discussed before the show. So, but did you have any other inspirations for it?
I have been a lifelong reader. I mean, probably since the age of like 7 or 8. I started reading what I consider to be the masters of modern fantasy. So Fritz Lieber, Howard, Lovecraft, a lot of the pulp authors, and then moved up. Obviously, Tolkien. You can't have a fantasy conversation without including Tolkien. But then some of the lesser known fantasy authors like Glenn Cook and his Black Company, Robert Asprin and Lynn Abbey. They came together with a whole bunch of awesome authors to do the Thieves World anthology, which really was, one of the literary soundtracks of my childhood, because it was just such a well designed concept and project. And then, of course, Orson Scott Card, Stephen Bruce, both of them have this fantastic way to make characters flawed and thusly relatable, but not unlikable. Right? Like sometimes a flawed character, crosses over into that territory of being unlikable. But both Bruce and Orson Scott Card have an ability to make their characters flawed, but but in a way that you root for them, not that you root against them.
Okay. And speaking of characters, tell us a little bit about your main character.
Stephen, and by extension Hollis. Stephen is the character that's rooted in our world. He really hasn't had like what I would consider to be a terrible life, but he definitely has had a life that's rooted in tragedy. He's lost a good amount of his friends, and his parents at an early age, and due to that, he seems to always seek that safe path. So if there's a path that has a little bit of risk and a path that is guaranteed, he sticks with the path that's guaranteed, often to his detriment. He finds himself in a job that he doesn't really like because, it's there, it pays him, and it is pretty easy. Finds himself in a marriage with a woman who doesn't respect him, and he's not really sure ever loved him, but she was there and she accepted him at a low point in his life. So he feels a certain amount of loyalty towards her, and accepts a lot of abuse for it. He as I said, has lost a good amount of his friends, and then as the book begins, he loses another couple. and they all seem to be tied to the game, which is, my generic analogy for any given role playing game, Dungeons and Dragons, fantasy, whatever. Um, and he then is, trying to make some sense out of it. Hollis, on the other hand, which is Stephen's reflection in Tyr, has gone the opposite direction. He too is plagued by losses of friends and family and tragedy. However, rather than choosing the safe path, he chooses the path that holds the most, I don't want to say excitement, the most challenge. Hollis is not really fond of times when things become quiet. He's not really at home with his own thoughts. He'd rather be engaged with something that stops him from sort of examining himself. And if you combine the two characters, they're a pretty engaging character, and then and they discover each other, and they discover something in each other that the other was lacking.
Okay, so when you were writing the characters, they're kind of, well, I'm not sure if mirror image is the right word, but so obviously the character based in real world is sort of like a surrogate for the reader.
Yes.
But is the character in the fantasy world sort of like a surrogate for what we'd like to be in our if we were in a fantasy world?
I think it is, maybe not everybody. It's certainly, a surrogate for what Stephen would want to be. And what a lot of people that I've gamed with would see themselves, heroic, adventurous, daring, sort of devil may care, which is something that, in our day-to-day lives, it's hard to do. Right, like it's hard to give up that safety and that guarantee for excitement and adventure. So absolutely, I would say that it could serve for a surrogate of your desired persona.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the fantasy part of your setting.
Tyr is a world that's very much like ours, except it's rooted in that pseudo medieval time period. However, I consider it to be what I would call like a low fantasy. So there is magic, certainly, but magic is the purview of the powerful. To a certain extent, the rich. If you can pay for magic, you can have it. There are what you would consider like your fantasy healing. So you would have like a cleric or a priest of one of the gods. They could certainly heal your broken arm or your sickness, but it costs. So for people that for the majority of people, the people that can't afford to pay for things, life doesn't change a lot. Like in a world where with the with the wave of your hand you could cure tuberculosis, most poor people still die of tuberculosis because they can't afford it. So there are some medicine type solutions, but it's medieval medicine, leeches and things like that. It is definitely a human centric world. However, there are a couple of other races. They're not covered in great detail. They're definitely a mystery to the majority of the population. And the world is, like I said, it's pretty gritty, right? I don't know that it's quite to the grittiness level of a Game of Thrones, but it's definitely not like what I would consider a high fantasy world.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about the antagonists in the book without spoilers, that is?
Okay, so the antagonists are responsible for a great deal of the tragedy that befalls both characters. And lies in the connection between the worlds. There is a concept known as the Well of Worlds or the Well of Shadows that can grant great power, although it's bought in blood. And those that are seeking this power are responsible for the for the tragedy that befalls both characters, in the people that they've lost. I don't want to give too much of a
Yeah.
spoiler, but it definitely, as you're reading the book, there are characters that appear to be trying to help the protagonists. They're actively working against them, and then there are characters that you think may be your antagonists that end up coming through in the end and helping out.
So we have
It's kind of a
some, yeah,
generic description,
we
but
have some nice twists and turns. In other words,
yes, I think so.
Okay, so what was the hardest scene or the hardest type of scene for you to write in the book?
The hardest scene, excuse me, the hardest scene I think was towards the end when things are coming to a close, and I had to write yet another tragic scene for the protagonist, that involved a character that I had grown kind of close to. I don't know how it is with other writers, but certainly with me, I get invested in my characters, even if I know that I'm going to have to do away with them at some point. And this character was a character that I had seen going a little further, forth a little bit further. But unfortunately, the way the plot had shaken out, it was the best solution to the situation that was, that was before me. And it was just sort of a little heartbreaking, right? What I had to do to this, admittedly secondary character, that, became the stereotypical Star Trek red shirt, right? I had to demonstrate how the monster worked. And, bad things had to happen to this poor guy.
Okay. Yeah, just I'm getting messages here, which is why I'm hesitating.
No problem.
They're giving me messages about things I shouldn't be doing. Anyway, I'll take care of that later. So tell me what your favorite scene to write in the book was.
I think my favorite scene to write was after Hollis, and it's a little bit of a spoiler, but not a huge spoiler. Hollis ends up in a prison. And after his escape, he has the opportunity to pay a visit to the person who put him there. And I really enjoyed writing that scene. I felt that it was very cathartic, to see him gain a measure of revenge, but also that even at that point, Steven is having some influence on him. So it doesn't end, in the way that you would think a lifelong thief and killer would bring some vengeance. It ends, I think, in a little bit more of an intellectual, damage as opposed to physical. And I really didn't. And I enjoy, every time I read the scene, I enjoy it.
Oh, that
It makes me smile.
Okay, so do you have any quirky secondary characters that like to steal scenes from the main characters?
Absolutely. I have a character. Her name is Aristoi, who was built as the buddy in a sort of a medieval buddy cop drama, right? And I love the character. She's a strong, clever, funny, wise character. And I passed the book off to my beta readers. I passed the book off to folks who bought the book in the first couple of weeks, and I was just floored by the popularity of this character. I got several messages who said, oh, we love Hollis and it's a great story. When are you writing the Aristoid book? Because that's what we want to see. You have some stories on your website you have to do with this world. Could you write some Aristoid stories?
Yeah, okay.
And
Yeah.
I've found that I really do enjoy writing the character. Like she's, super three-dimensional, super interesting. Um, if you go to my website, which is www.readslharby.com, I have some short stories that are prequels to the book. You don't need to read the book to appreciate the prequels or read the prequels to appreciate the book. They're separate. And I have a storyline running through those that I think readers may find interesting. And I found that I really do enjoy writing Aristoy as a character. So she's almost become like a secondary protagonist for me.
Yeah. Well. There's your companion novels for that series.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if I don't write them, I think some of my fans will riot.
Yeah. Okay. So, what are your characters afraid of?
That's interesting. Stephen is afraid. It has become almost afraid to try, right? Like he hasn't necessarily failed in more than he just stopped trying. He dropped out of college because it became too hard, and he was offered an easy way out. He was offered employment, so he just stopped trying. So he's afraid of failure. So to avoid failure, he just doesn't try. He takes the safe route every time. Hollis, on the other hand, is really afraid of the quiet. As I said, like he's made decisions on the fly so often, and he's carved out a lifestyle for himself that doesn't really require him to do much self-reflection. So he's always moving, and that's because he's afraid of those quiet times when he looks back and he realizes what is he lost, and he realizes the things that he's done and the things that he's sacrificed to get to where he is. Right. So he's almost afraid of his own reflection, which is, a big storyline throughout the whole book, the concept of your reflection. Stephen is also afraid of his reflection because in his reflection is the failure to try. They just deal with it in different ways.
Oh, sounds like there's some nice psychological issues going on in the book.
I like to think so. I like to think everyone's got a little bit of psychology going for them.
Okay. So obviously you write in the fantasy genre, but are there any other genres that you want to try or have tried?
Absolutely. I am currently working on a I guess you could call it dystopian. It's a zombie anthology of short stories. I'm now deciding whether or not I want to work with some other authors, a la Thieves World, or if I just want to sort of go it alone. The latter would cause the work to take a lot longer because I'd be writing them between my other projects. And just a week or so ago, I started a superhero novel that I'm really really happy with. But it's going in fits and spurts because I'm currently working on the sequel to Shadows of a Dream, Shadows of the Heart. So that one really sort of has to be my primary. But I definitely I love the horror genre. I love science fiction. I would love to do a sci-fi retelling of the Oresteia, which I don't know if you're familiar with, which is the story of the aftermath of the Trojan War, which is a fantastic trilogy of plays by, I believe it was Sophocles.
Well, that does sound interesting, a sci-fi version of that.
Yeah, I mean, because the storyline is universal. It's betrayal. It's, a character taking an action that they thought was right but ends up being wrong in the eyes of the law, and then trying to escape punishment long enough to explain their actions.
Okay, that does sound fascinating and something to look forward to.
Well,
So,
it's on the list.
I know that list. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here for today. And I'd like to
Okay.
thank you for being here and tell everyone where they can find you and your books.
My books are on Amazon. You can get them in paperback, Kindle, and Kindle Unlimited. My website is www.readslharby. On there, I have book reviews, creator interviews, as well as some short fiction and some background, essays on the world to sort of get you set up. I'm on Facebook as Read SL Harby. I'm on Twitter as Read SL Harby. My email address is readslharby@gmail.com. Anyone that wants to talk, wants to read the book or wants to talk fantasy or pulp fiction or sci-fi or comic books or 80s trivia. I'm a perpetual 80s kid. Can reach out. I love talking to people. I love discussing my passions.
Okay, sounds great. So again, thank you for
Thank
being
you for
here.
having me.
Pleasure chatting with you. And Between the Pages, we'll be back tomorrow with another guest. So join us then. And that's all for now. Bye.